Well, hello there, John Jackson.
Matt is an industry veteran even before his time at Micro Focus. Matt has had a lot of good real-world experience with actually some of our customers before he came on board with Micro Focus. Matt, you are a good person to talk about network automation, right?
Well, I like to think so. It's a fun topic to talk about.
On that note, when you say the word network automation, those are two words. And not only do we have a product called network automation from Micro Focus, but that's also an industry-wide term, correct? Network automation?
Yeah, so I find that network automation means a lot of different things to a lot of different people.
If you're talking about network automation, what do you think of when somebody says, hey, I'm doing network automation, or if you had to interview somebody that said, oh, I'm strong in network automation, what would you think of? What would be the things that you think of that person would be doing or a company would be doing in terms of network automation in general these days?
Well, like I said, that can mean different things, right? So I just think about like the history of quote unquote automation or network automation. And I think back in the day, it would have involved like Perl scripts, for example, to go out and do various things on the network. And then we, ended up with like there were vendor developed solutions out there. Like I actually came from Opsware, which is where the network automation that is currently with Micro Focus today came from. And by the way, actually, that was something that Cisco used to OEM for a while. And if you Google Cisco NCM today, you'll actually find that they don't OEM anymore, but you'll still see the information out there. And then newer things today have emerged for things like what we're going to be talking about on this call, things like Ansible. But then there's other things like Nornier and Salt and Napalm and a slew of others.
Yeah, and I always think of that as being a really nice feather in our cap that Cisco trusted and liked our solution so much that they wanted to rebrand it, kind of take it in as an OEM and rebrand it as Cisco NCM behind the scenes. So definitely a good mix there.
Yeah, they actually did like an 18-month evaluation of whether to build or buy. Their evaluation led them to Opsware. They OEM'd the solution, and it's still out there if you Google it out there today.
Well, and the good news is we are now once again a partner with Cisco. There's a lot of good things coming from that. We were actually invited to come out to Cisco Live. I guess it was the last actual live in-person Cisco Live in San Diego. Definitely, we do work very closely with Cisco and hope to get the band back together again on that front. Enough about Cisco and other companies. So, Matt, what are we doing as Micro Focus in the area of network automation? Can you kind of describe what is our product offering and our capability there?
I guess when we're having this conversation, I'll try and distinguish between the generic term network automation and when I'm referring to Micro Focus automation. For us, Micro Focus network automation is really kind of an automation platform, if you will. Okay, so it comes with a lot of out-of-the-box capabilities and real-time awareness of the network, doing things like real-time change detection and collection, keeping a complete history of the network, of all things network, hardware, software, configuration, diagnostic. And so, yeah, like I said, that's like real-time awareness of everything that's going on the network.
There's probably a lot of competitors out there in this industry that we compete with from a network automation standpoint, right?
I suppose there is, yes. Like I said, there's a lot of differences in the solutions, but there are other vendors out there who say they do network automation in some form.
And if we had to set ourselves apart from a lot of the other vendors that are out there, both from open source and commercial solutions, what would you say would be Micro Focus's big advantages in the network automation space?
Well, first of all, it's an officially supported platform, right? But we can talk about Micro Focus specializes in enterprise class solutions. So what does that mean? First of all, we can talk about enterprise scalability. We've currently tested up to 120,000 devices with a single deployment. Could probably do more than that. That's just as far as we've tested so far. It would also refer to things like device driver coverage, right? Because an enterprise is going to consist of many different vendors and technologies. And, part of the idea is to get rid of the swivel chair management that comes with every time you introduce a new vendor or a new technology. But then that also includes configuration management, things like provisioning. We could talk about, bare metal provisioning, zero touch provisioning, that type of thing. 3D compliance, right? So what does that mean? Well, you've got different aspects of compliance. So there's configuration compliance, right? But then you've got things like diagnostic compliance, which checks your running state to make sure that, you might be configured a certain way, but services are not necessarily working because they may have been blocked, right, by a firewall or an ACL or whatnot. And so, having diagnostic compliance ensures that your running state matches how you're configured. Things like software compliance and CVE monitoring and compliance and whatnot. Micro Focus is doing some things today like no one else on the market is doing as far as bringing together configuration and performance overlays to be able to actually see what's going on. I mean, from an industry perspective, those things have always been kind of separate. The NOC might have their incident or performance dashboards displayed up on a wall, and something goes haywire, and the first thing you do is swivel chair around to go manually track down what happened. So, I think the way I would summarize that is the Micro Focus solution is an enterprise class network change and compliance management solution together with a enterprise class monitoring solution.
Thank you for the kind of the lead up on what we do from Micro Focus, but the key inspiration that we had for this podcast that we wanted to share not only with our customers, but also for people out in the industry that are not our customers is the topic of Ansible. We're seeing Ansible showing up in a lot of our customers. I'm seeing it out on every podcast. I see it on websites. I've even just today, like you, received an email from Red Hat to go attend their seminar. So what's going on from a network automation standpoint with Ansible? Can you kind of jump into that and kind of share what we really want to get to in this podcast?
Yeah, so that was actually kind of an interesting interaction we had recently with one of our customers. He was a longtime network automation customer, so I'm referring to the Micro Focus network automation solution now, and was a very happy customer, but was still interested in looking at Ansible and Python for their configuration management. And so, frankly, I had not had a lot of background in Ansible, and we were preparing a workshop to do together. So in preparation for that, I started looking into Ansible, and I realized that basically the way Ansible is just another interpreter, and the Micro Focus network automation solution has supported plug-and-play configuration management solutions since the earliest days of the product back in the early 2000s. Basically, once I got into looking at that, I realized, okay, Ansible is going to play very well with the existing Micro Focus network automation solution right out of the box. And so when we talked to that customer, he was actually explaining that his management was basically kind of directing that we will use Ansible network automation. And at the time, they were thinking, we don't need Micro Focus network automation anymore. And so this customer went back to management and explained to them, hey, time out, wait a second. You can't do that because Micro Focus network automation does all the things that Ansible does not do today, right? So all of the things that I was just describing a minute ago, basically configuration management is like one slice of what Micro Focus network automation does out of the box. It's kind of a apples to orange tree comparison, if you will. Micro Focus network automation has all the enterprise class capabilities that Ansible itself lacks today.
And that's actually a good point. A lot of people don't realize what Ansible is and how it's structured. So to kind of give people a feel for the background of Ansible, and again, I want to admit Matt and I are not Ansible subject matter experts. A lot of this information we've learned from our own research, from feedback from our customers. But from what we've learned, Matt, what would you say Ansible is versus what Ansible is not? Could you kind of run through that for us?
Well, sure. So, I mean, as far as the evolution of Ansible, Ansible started off as a more of a server management solution, server automation tool. And then it evolved and adapted into the network space. So yeah, that actually is something that it's become a little bit more popular in the network space over the last handful of years. But as we touched on a minute ago, I mean, what it is, it's a configuration management solution specifically. And by the way, I mean, when we're talking about Ansible, I mean, there's free Ansible versus the paid version, which is where you bring Ansible Tower into the picture. So Ansible Tower is kind of their enterprise solution, if you will, to manage and execute Ansible and things like Ansible playbooks and whatnot. It involves things like programming in YAML and Genja 2, and which actually is something that, my understanding basically is because I've done some programming in Ansible. Don't have a lot of background, but from what I've learned from my own learning experience, as well as reading blogs and things online and whatnot, is Ansible can be very good at what it does if you're using existing content and the existing modules that come with Ansible. But when you start evolving into more, advanced logic, I forget who said it, but I saw one of the experts online say that programming in Ansible can be a lot like doing gymnastics with a suit of armor.
I'd like to see that video. That would be cool, seeing gymnastics in armor. That would be very cool.
So anyway, yeah, that's kind of what it involves, which, by the way, gets into another aspect of the conversation here, that, Ansible is billed as being radically simple. And so, that's a matter of perspective as far as how you look at that. Because, I mean, I think if you were to look at our solution today, the Micro Focus network automation solution, we certainly support advanced solutions. And, like I said, plug and play, Perl, Python, Ansible playbooks, et cetera. However, we also support the concept of, what we call basic change plans, which is essentially just sequences of variabilized vendor syntax.
Matt, in English, basically that would be native device CLI syntax. Could that be a better way to say
exactly.
it?
Yeah, it doesn't get any simpler than that, right? I mean, there's the vendor syntax that engineers work with every single day is something that they're going to know and be comfortable with, right? Not all network engineers know programming. And so the basic change plans, it doesn't include, more advanced if then else type of logic, but a lot of our customers get away with a lot of automation, I should say, just implementing these basic variabilized change plans that just involve nothing more than the vendor syntax that they're comfortable with.
All right, good point. So, Matt, I think you need to take a sip of your beverage because you haven't gotten to enjoy it yet because you've been talking.
Just let me say, one of the things that I've seen as far as, what Ansible is not, is the idea that, there's no like real network awareness. I mean, Ansible can push configuration changes and whatnot, but it's not necessarily aware of when changes are taking place, or if someone's gone and changed a device directly, or things like real-time compliance management and things like that.
So what you're saying is there's no monitoring.
Right, and monitoring can mean different things, but right, actually that's a good point. Monitoring change is kind of a key thing, and like I mentioned earlier, that's one of the things we're bringing to the table that really hasn't been done effectively from an industry perspective before.
And again, we're not trying to put Ansible down here. We're not trying to, we're not Ansible bashers. We're just trying to state kind of the positioning of what Ansible is and what it is not, because the next topic, and again, the reason for this podcast is, what can we do? What is the value of integrating Ansible with Micro Focus network automation? So Matt, can you touch on why that is a value as you sip your bourbon, or maybe after you sip your bourbon or rum? I think you're drinking rum on this call. But after you get that nice sip down, kind of explain what is the big value of why a customer would want to consider plugging Ansible into their Micro Focus network automation solution for existing customers, and then for again, this podcast is not just for existing customers. This is also for you guys that are out there that are Ansible folks, and why you might want to consider adding a tool like our Micro-Focus network automation. So Matt, take it away and kind of explain what's the big value in bringing the two together.
All right, so good question. So first of all, backing up, you're right. We're not at all bashing Ansible here. Ansible is very good at what it does, and it's a popular tool out there. What I would suggest is that anybody who's looking at Ansible or considering Ansible should look at the two solutions together and how they complement each other. So what do I mean by that? What does Micro-Focus network automation do with Ansible? Well, we kind of already alluded to that, but the thing that, and first of all, we've had customers our existing customers who've looked at Ansible and who decided, you know what, we're good. We already have a configuration management solution we're comfortable with, and we don't really need Ansible.
And Matt, when you say they have a configuration management system they're comfortable with, you're meaning they can do everything they need to with the Micro-Focus network automation tool, period, right?
Correct, exactly. Now, we do provide some out-of-the-box content, but Ansible has a lot more existing content, either that comes from Ansible or community contributed. So that would be one of the things that Ansible would bring to the table for Micro-Focus network automation would be that existing content. And so, yeah, the customer that I was mentioning earlier, that was what they were interested in looking at.
All right, perfect. One of the things that I think you mentioned this earlier in the discussion was, one of the big epiphanies that we came up with from our research on whether we could integrate with Ansible at all was the fact that you found out that it was very easy. And in fact, we should have been doing this 5 to 10 years ago. But now that Ansible is showing up on the radar, we basically, what was your big quote there that we determined kind of was our epiphany?
So yeah, I mean, basically, the Micro-Focus network automation solution out of the box supports plug-and-play configuration management solutions. So all you have to do is provide the path to whatever interpretive scripting language that you want to use, and then you're off and running.
And more specifically, Ansible is just another interpretive scripting language to NA. Like we've always had support for Python, Bash, what's the other one that's out there?
Perl, expect,
yeah. So it's plugged in. It's been, from the inception of network automation as a product, we've been able to support these external scripting languages, and Ansible's just another one coming down the road that we support in that case.
Correct.
All right. When you talked about content, in the form of content, what content are you talking about that comes from Ansible that helps to enhance network automation? What's an example there of some of the content that you could leverage?
I mean, they have content for various vendors, which, by the way, just to note, I mean, Micro-Focus network automation supports now like over 200 vendors, like over 3,500 network device. So, I mean, there's very, very broad device support. Actually much broader than Ansible supports today. But they do exist. They do support a handful of vendors, and there is a bunch of content that's out there.
That's another good point. I've been talking to a lot of customers as well, and the reason why they like Ansible is because vendors such as Cisco, Juniper, Palo Alto, they're creating Ansible playbooks from the vendor, from Cisco, and putting it in, I believe they put them in a Git repo or somewhere where they make them available. But that stuff is being generated by the vendor so that the customer doesn't have to. And I think that's very appealing for customers in that case.
Agreed. So yeah, one of the things that the customers like about the existing content, it kind of abstracts the CLI interaction away and makes automation accessible, I guess, if you will, usable by people who otherwise might not be comfortable dealing with vendor device command lines. So, I mean, for example, just off the top of my head, so like the Cisco.iOS collection provides a number of modules that you can build into your Ansible playbooks for something just as simple as like setting a login banner. There's a module out there for that. So you can just drop that into your Ansible playbook, configure the parameters of the module, and you're done.
Let's wrap it up. We're getting towards the magical 22-minute mark here for our podcast. So if you had to summarize kind of the benefits of why you would want to integrate IBM Red Hat Ansible with Micro Focus's network automation product, what would be kind of the top 7 reasons why this would provide a huge value to our customers, Matt?
Wow, going to nail me down to 7, huh?
7, not 8, not 6, 7.
Well, so where do you start? I mean, I think first of all, I would probably start, well, with that enterprise word again. So for things like enterprise scalable, having a scalable automation for your environment, utilizing the existing Red Hat and community content that we were just talking about, the compliance management capabilities, the real-time compliance management capability that comes, like, for example, with Micro Focus network automation. I know that Ansible says that they do compliance. They do it in kind of a different way. I'd encourage listeners to evaluate the way that those two things are done. We can get into the aspect of, I mean, this is kind of an apples to oranges comparison, right? But with Micro Focus, we have fault and performance monitoring capabilities, which I mentioned. We're actually like integrating with the change and compliance capabilities that make some pretty cool capabilities available to our customers. We've got an event-driven system within our solution that can be used for a lot of different purposes, but that can also be used to integrate with Ansible. And then we've actually got a fairly sophisticated enterprise discovery capability, and we can actually use that to integrate the inventory of the Micro Focus network operations management solution with Ansible. And that's done through a dynamic inventory script, similar to what a vendor like AWS provides for their EC2 environment for customers managing EC2 with Ansible.
So I've been keeping track in my head. I think I've heard 6 bullets. So now we have one last one. What would be the last bullet that you could add from a top 7 reasons?
Well, you held me to 7. So I don't know. I guess maybe what I would add to that is the idea of like credential management. That's a thing within Ansible. And that's something that, as you would expect, that we're already doing with the enterprise network change and compliance management solution that we've got today. So we're already capturing and storing and managing those device credentials that need to be utilized to access the network device infrastructure. And we can provide those dynamically at runtime as we execute these playbooks. So we kind of take that responsibility away from Ansible and provide it via our Micro Focus solution.
And actually, when you say take away from the responsibility from Ansible, you're actually helping the customer out because they don't have to do it in Ansible. They're already doing it with network automation, and it makes their life easier from what I've seen with a couple of our customers that have already done this integration. So that is my main point there. And to kind of summarize, if I can repeat for understanding what you just said, Micro Focus network automation adds a lot of those enterprise management elements that Ansible just doesn't have. I mean, it's just by the nature of it as a scripting language, as a runbook automation tool. It wasn't designed to do that. So Micro Focus complement Ansible with some of those things that it doesn't have and it was never designed to have. So it's actually a better together solution than the two standing apart. Is that a true statement?
So
Mr.
that's
Miller?
a true statement, and I know we're winding down, so I think one of the last things I would leave with here is that our customers had actually asked us, hey, can you help us? We're having these conversations with our management about, what the different solutions are and are not. And so what we did was we put together a capability comparison matrix that actually helps customers understand, what do the different solutions do and what do the different solutions not do so that they can make educated decisions about how they want to move forward.
Mr. Miller, if someone was interested in this matrix or any white papers that you may have published, where would they go? Where would you send them?
Well, there's our Micro Focus practitioner portal. I mean, it's all Google searchable, so you could find it that way. But, I'll go ahead and throw out my contact information. If someone's interested, you could reach out to matt.miller@microfocus.com, and I can answer your questions and or route you to the right resources to get your questions answered.
That is awesome. Mine is john.jackson@microfocus.com. But yes, Matt, thank you very much. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the podcast. If you have any topics that you would like us to cover, please let us know. Send Matt or myself an email, and we would be more than happy to jump on the next topic. Thank you much. Have a great weekend, and enjoy the podcast.